A poor girl's unexpected journey as the wife of a wealthy stranger. The tiny, wind-beaten village sat perched on the edge of a cliff, its stone cottages clustered tightly as if bracing against the relentless ocean winds. In one such modest home, Maria pressed her forehead against the frosted windowpane, her breath forming small clouds on the glass. The distant sound of church bells echoed faintly, signaling the end of another long day. Maria, 22 years old and accustomed to the daily grind of a fisherman's daughter, had no reason to suspect that tonight would lead to a crossroads she never imagined. A sharp and urgent knock at the door broke the monotony. Her frail mother, wrapped in a threadbare shawl, glanced at her with wide, questioning eyes. Who could that be at this hour? Maria shrugged and moved to answer. When she swung open the creaky door, a tall, sharply dressed stranger with piercing gray eyes and a rigid demeanor stood before her, silhouetted against the moonlight. "Miss Maria Hernandez?" the man asked, his voice smooth yet clipped, betraying the weight of his mission. Maria's heart skipped. No one outside the village knew her name, or so she thought. "I've come with a proposal," he said, holding out a sealed letter embossed with a golden emblem. The sight of it felt like both an invitation and an omen. Maria hesitated before taking the letter, her fingers trembling. As the man returned to the night, his cryptic parting words echoed in her ears. "The master awaits your answer, and time is of the essence." Little did Maria know, this singular encounter would upend her quiet life, plunging her into a world of wealth, secrets, and a marriage that would demand much more than her hand. Maria Hernandez had lived her entire life within the confines of the small coastal village of Santa Clara, a place where ambition was a luxury no one could afford. The village was defined by its simplicity, jagged cliffs that plunged into the sea, cobbled streets that weathered countless storms, and a community bound together by shared hardships. Her father, a fisherman, had passed away years ago when his boat succumbed to the merciless tides, leaving Maria, her younger brother Tomas, and their mother to fend for themselves. Since then, life has been a series of monotonous routines and quiet sacrifices. Maria worked tirelessly cleaning fish, mending nets, and assisting the elderly neighbors for meager pay. Despite her meager circumstances, Maria possessed a rare inner light. Her gentle kindness and fierce determination earned her the quiet admiration of her neighbors, who often whispered about her potential to do something greater, though no one could ever quite imagine what that might be. At 22, Maria had all but abandoned the naive dreams of her childhood. She had resigned herself to a life of unchanging routine, focused on ensuring Tomas' education and their mother's fragile health. Her days revolved around survival, and though she occasionally let her thoughts drift to the possibilities of a different life, they always felt like distant, unreachable stars. The arrival of the stranger that winter evening shook the very foundations of Maria's world. The sealed letter he delivered wasn't just a summons, it was a doorway into a life she couldn't comprehend. The letter spoke of a mysterious benefactor, a man of immense wealth who had taken an interest in Maria for reasons left deliberately vague. It promised riches, security, and an escape from the oppressive constraints of her existence. But beneath the gilded promise lay an unspoken question: at what cost? Maria's fingers lingered on the embossed seal of the letter long after the stranger had disappeared into the shadows of Santa Clara. Her mother's frail voice broke the silence. "Maria, what is it?" But Maria couldn't respond, her thoughts racing as she hesitated to break the seal. The golden emblem, intricate and foreign, glimmered in the dim candlelight as though daring her to reveal its secrets. When she finally opened the letter, her eyes scanned the elegant script, each word more surreal than the last. "Miss Maria Hernandez. You have been chosen for an extraordinary opportunity. My employer, the esteemed Mr. Alexander Whitmore, seeks to extend his generosity to a young woman of great character and resilience. He is a man of immense means and wishes to provide you with an opportunity that few could dream of. However, his request is not without conditions. He desires companionship and partnership, a union of mutual respect and agreement. Should you accept this proposal, you will find yourself the mistress of a grand estate, free of financial burden and able to secure a future not only for yourself but for your family. However, your decision must be made swiftly. A carriage will arrive in 3 days to collect your answer. Enclosed is a sum to ensure you have time to consider this proposal without distraction. Yours sincerely, Edwin Cartwright. Secretary to Mr. Whitmore. A smaller envelope fell into her lap. With trembling hands, Maria opened it to find more money than she had ever seen in her life. Her breath caught in her throat, and her mother gasped. "Maria! What is this?" Torn between disbelief and a sense of wonder, Maria felt an unfamiliar surge of hope, immediately followed by doubt. What sort of man would seek a wife this way? And why her? Questions swirled in her mind, but the sight of her mother's sunken cheeks and Tomas's worn boots grounded her thoughts. For years, they had struggled, their future a bleak horizon. This could be a chance to lift them out of despair, yet it felt as though she was peering into the jaws of the unknown. The days passed in a haze of contemplation. As the village buzzed with speculation about the stranger and his purpose, Maria wrestled with her choices. On the eve of the third day, she found herself by the shore, the cold waves lapping at her feet as she gazed out at the infinite sea. Finally, with a deep breath, she whispered to herself, "I will go. For them." When the carriage arrived the following morning, its sleek black exterior shining ominously in the pale light, Maria stepped inside, leaving behind the only life she had ever known. Whatever awaited her beyond Santa Clara would change her forever. Maria's journey from Santa Clara to the grand estate of Mr. Alexander Whitmore was unlike anything she had ever experienced. The carriage ride felt both endless and surreal, her small bundle of belongings at her feet serving as the only connection to the life she was leaving behind. The world outside the frosted windows shifted from the familiar coastal cliffs to vast, rolling hills and dense forests, each passing scene pulling her further from everything she had ever known. When the carriage finally halted before an imposing iron gate, Maria's breath caught. Beyond it lay a sprawling estate, the main house towering against the backdrop of a setting sun. Its ornate facade gleamed with the kind of opulence Maria had only seen in storybooks. The driver opened her door and helped her down, his expression impassive but polite. "This way, miss," he said, leading her through the gates and up a long gravel driveway lined with ancient oaks. At the entrance to the mansion, a man in his 60s awaited her. His sharp suit and carefully groomed appearance matched the air of precision he exuded. He introduced himself as Edwin Cartwright, Mr. Whitmore's secretary, the very man who had penned the letter that brought her here. "Miss Hernandez," he began, his tone formal, "welcome to Hawthorne Manor. Mr. Whitmore awaits you in the drawing room. Follow me, please." Maria followed in silence, her eyes wide as she took in the grandeur of the interior. Marble floors stretched beneath intricate chandeliers, and the walls were adorned with oil paintings that seemed to watch her every move. It was a world so alien to her that she felt like an intruder in a dream. They stopped before a set of heavy double doors, which Cartwright pushed open to reveal a large, warmly lit drawing room. Seated by the fire was Alexander Whitmore. He stood as she entered, and Maria was struck by his commanding presence. He was tall and impeccably dressed, his dark hair streaked with silver at the temples. His sharp, piercing eyes studied her with an intensity that made her feel both seen and exposed. "Miss Hernandez," he said, his voice deep and smooth. "Thank you for coming. Please, have a seat." Maria hesitated before perching on the edge of a luxurious armchair. Whitmore's gaze didn't waver as he continued, "You must have many questions. Allow me to explain." He spoke of his wealth, his influence, and his desire for companionship. His words were measured, his tone unyielding. He made it clear that this was a partnership, not a love match, and that he valued qualities like resilience and strength of character above all else. "I believe you possess those qualities, Maria. This arrangement is mutually beneficial. You and your family will want for nothing, and in return, I require someone I can trust." Someone who can stand beside me without fear or hesitation. Maria listened, her heart pounding. His offer was as tempting as it was daunting. To lift her family from poverty, to ensure Tomas's future, it was everything she had dreamed of providing for them. Yet, the reality of the situation was undeniable. She was agreeing to marry a man she barely knew, stepping into a world where she felt utterly out of place. After a long pause, Maria finally spoke. "I will do my best to fulfill my role, Mr. Whitmore." For the first time, his expression softened, and he nodded. "Good. We will formalize the arrangement soon. In the meantime, Cartwright will see to your needs and ensure you are acclimated to your new surroundings." The days that followed were overwhelming. Maria's simple dresses were replaced with tailored gowns, and she was introduced to a staff of servants who addressed her as Miss Hernandez, with a deference that felt unnatural. Cartwright provided her with lessons on etiquette and social expectations, his stern demeanor a constant reminder of the gravity of her new role. Despite her efforts to adapt, Maria often felt like an outsider. The grandeur of Hawthorne Manor was suffocating, its endless halls echoing with the weight of unspoken expectations. She longed for the salty air of Santa Clara, the warmth of her mother's voice, and the simplicity of her old life. Her interactions with Alexander were brief but significant. He was a man of few words, his demeanor guarded and enigmatic. Yet, Maria began to notice glimpses of vulnerability beneath his stoic exterior. During one of their shared dinners, he asked about her family, listening intently as she spoke of Tomas's love for books and her mother's strength despite her frailty. His questions were genuine, his attention unwavering. "You speak of them with such love," he observed, his voice quieter than usual. "Family is a rare and precious thing." Maria nodded, her gaze meeting his. "It's everything to me." As weeks turned into months, Maria's unease began to ebb. She found solace in the estate's gardens, where she could breathe freely and find moments of peace. The staff, initially distant, began to warm to her, recognizing her humility in genuine kindness. Slowly, she started to feel less like an imposter and more like someone who belonged. But not everything was as tranquil as it seemed. Rumors swirled among the staff about Alexander's past, whispers of heartbreak and betrayal that had shaped the man he was today. Maria's curiosity grew, but she knew better than to ask him directly. Instead, she observed, piecing together fragments of information from overheard conversations and the rare moments when Alexander let his guard slip. One evening, as they walked together through the garden, Maria gathered the courage to broach the subject. "Mr. Whitmore," she began tentatively, "may I ask you something personal?" He paused, his expression unreadable. "You may. Why did you choose this arrangement? Why not marry for love?" Alexander's jaw tightened, and for a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. But then he sighed, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Love is a luxury I can no longer afford. It blinds people and makes them vulnerable. I have learned the cost of such vulnerability, and I will not pay it again." His words were heavy with pain, and Maria felt a pang of sympathy. "But surely not everyone," she began, but he cut her off gently. "Enough," he said, his tone firm but not unkind. "Some wounds are best left undisturbed." As they continued their walk in silence, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that beneath Alexander's guarded exterior lay a man who had once loved deeply and suffered greatly. She resolved to honor her part of the arrangement, but a seed of hope took root in her heart, the hope that, perhaps, she could help him heal. The grand ballroom of Hawthorne Manor was bathed in golden light as chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting reflections across the polished marble floors. The estate's most opulent event of the year was in full swing, with dignitaries, business magnates, and social elites mingling, their laughter and chatter echoing through the cavernous space. Maria stood at the edge of the room, dressed in an exquisite gown that Alexander had personally selected for her. She looked every bit the lady of the house, yet inside, she felt like a fragile thread stretched taut. It had been nearly a year since she arrived at Hawthorne Manor, and while Maria had adjusted to the rhythms of her new life, a sense of uncertainty still lingered. Her relationship with Alexander remained complex. He was distant yet attentive, reserved yet protective. She had grown to admire his intellect and his fierce sense of duty, but the walls he had built around his heart seemed impenetrable. Tonight, however, everything would change. Maria's gaze swept the room until it landed on Alexander. He stood near the grand staircase, speaking in low tones with an older man whose pinched expression suggested a tense conversation. As Maria approached, she overheard snippets of their exchange. "This is a dangerous move, Whitmore," the man said sharply. "You're putting everything at risk." "I've made my decision," Alexander replied firmly. "It's not up for debate." The older man shook his head and stormed off, leaving Alexander visibly tense. Maria hesitated before stepping closer. "Is everything all right?" she asked softly. Alexander turned to her, his expression softening slightly. "Maria," he said, his tone gentler. "Yes, everything is fine. Just business matters." But Maria could see the strain in his eyes. "You can trust me," she said, placing a hand on his arm. "If something is troubling you, I want to help." He studied her for a moment as if weighing her sincerity. Finally, he sighed and led her to a quieter corner of the room. "There's something you need to know," he began, his voice low. "Tonight is more than just a social event. It's the culmination of a gamble I've been taking for months. If it goes wrong, everything I've built could crumble." Maria's heart quickened. "What kind of gamble?" "A financial alliance," he explained. "One that could secure the future of the estate and everyone who depends on it. But there are complications. People who would rather see me fail." Before Maria could respond, a commotion erupted near the main entrance. A man in a dark suit, his face flushed with anger, strode into the ballroom, flanked by two others. The music faltered as guests turned to watch the intrusion. Alexander's jaw tightened. "Stay here," he instructed Maria firmly before moving toward the men. Maria's chest tightened with unease as she watched Alexander confront the intruders. Their voices rose, sharp and hostile, as accusations were hurled. Words like betrayal and deception cut through the air, sending ripples of unease through the crowd. Unable to stay put, Maria stepped forward. "Stop," she called, her voice clear and steady despite the pounding of her heart. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to her. "Whatever disagreement you have," Maria said, addressing the men, "this is not the place to resolve it. You're humiliating yourselves and disrespecting everyone here." The leader of the group sneered. "And who are you to interfere?" "She is my wife," Alexander said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. He stepped beside Maria, his presence solid and unwavering. "And you will treat her with the respect she deserves." For a moment, the tension hung in the air like a thundercloud. Then, the man scoffed and signaled to his companions to leave. As they retreated, the murmur of the crowd resumed, the crisis narrowly averted. Alexander turned to Maria, his expression unreadable. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. "Yes, I did," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "Because I care about you, and I care about this place. I won't let anyone tear it down." For the first time, Alexander's guarded facade cracked. His hand found hers, and he held it tightly. "Thank you, Maria," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever." Maria's heart swelled. At that moment, she realized that the walls between them were finally beginning to crumble. The days following the dramatic confrontation in the ballroom marked a turning point for both Maria and Alexander. The incident, though unsettling, had stripped away the final barriers between them. For the first time, Maria felt truly seen by Alexander, not as a participant in an arrangement but as an equal, a partner in every sense of the word. The morning after the ball, Alexander surprised Maria by seeking her out in the garden. He found her kneeling by the rose bushes, her hands dusted with soil as she tended to the blooms. She looked up at him, her expression a mixture of surprise and curiosity. "You should have let the gardener handle that," he teased gently, but there was a softness in his voice that Maria hadn't heard before. Maria wiped her hands on her apron and stood. "I enjoy it," she said simply. "It reminds me of home." Alexander nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "I owe you an apology, Maria. For everything. For the coldness, the distance, and for dragging you into a life you never asked for." Maria's heart softened as she looked at him. "You don't owe me anything," she replied. "I chose to be here. And despite everything, I don't regret it." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of unspoken feelings hung between them, delicate but undeniable. "Maria," Alexander began, his voice faltering slightly, "I've spent so much of my life shielding myself from the world. From pain. From vulnerability. But you've made me realize that there's more to life than control and caution. You've shown me what it means to care again." Maria's breath caught as she saw the raw sincerity in his eyes. "Alexander," she began, but he held up a hand. "Let me finish," he said, his lips curving into a faint smile. "I know this began as an arrangement, a transaction of sorts. But somewhere along the way, it became something much more. I want you to know that I don't see you as just my wife in name. I see you as my partner, my equal, and my future. If you'll have me." Tears pricked Maria's eyes as she stepped closer. "You've given me and my family a life I never thought possible," she said softly. "But more than that, you've shown me that even in a world as cold as this one can sometimes feel, there's warmth to be found. I'll stand by you, Alexander, not because I have to, but because I want to." Alexander's hand reached for hers, and she took it without hesitation. At that moment, the garden seemed to glow, the sunlight filtering through the trees and casting golden light around them. It felt as though the world had aligned just for them. The months that followed brought a new rhythm to their lives. Maria took an active role in managing the estate, working alongside Alexander to ensure its prosperity. Her practical wisdom and innate kindness won over even the most skeptical members of the staff and community. She initiated programs to aid the tenants of the estate, ensuring they had access to education, healthcare, and growth opportunities. Under her guidance, Hawthorne Manor became a beacon of hope and generosity. Alexander, too, changed in ways that surprised even himself. He found joy in the simple moments, sharing quiet breakfasts with Maria in the sunlit dining room, walking hand in hand through the estate's grounds, and listening to her dreams for the future. Her optimism and resilience inspired him to embrace life more fully, to open his heart in ways he had long thought impossible. One evening, as they sat together on the terrace overlooking the gardens, Maria rested her head on Alexander's shoulder. "Do you think we found it?" she asked softly. "Found what?" he replied, his voice equally gentle. "Happiness," she said, gazing at the stars. "The kind that lasts." Alexander considered her words, then pressed a kiss to her forehead. "I think we've built it," he said. "Brick by brick, moment by moment. And I have no intention of letting it slip away." Their life together wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was built on trust, respect, and a love that had grown slowly but deeply. Maria often thought back to the night she had opened that letter, to the uncertainty and fear that had gripped her. She never could have imagined where the path would lead, but as she looked at Alexander, she knew she wouldn't change a single step. Hawthorne Manor thrived under their care, becoming a place not just of wealth but of compassion and community. Maria and Alexander's story became one that the tenants and staff shared with pride, a testament to the power of second chances and the strength of a love forged in the unlikeliest of circumstances. And so, as the years passed, the name Maria Whitmore became synonymous with grace, courage, and resilience. And alongside her, Alexander found not only redemption but the life he had thought lost to him forever. Together, They proved that even in a world of impossible odds, love could bloom and flourish, defying every expectation.